So we are starting chapter 4.2, and we're going to be talking about China, an Asian giant indeed. It's the world's oldest living civilization is in China. So you can see China here, and you see where it's bordered. You see the East China Sea, the South China Sea over here. Today, Vietnam, Myanmar, Laos, Bangladesh, Nepal, India, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, little parts of Russia up here Russia, Mongolia, right in the middle there. So let's start. Here's a picture of some Chinese elite dress of the ancient China. Put that in there. So China. China, you can see the rivers there. You see the Changwang, which would be the Yangtze River, and the Wanghe River there. So you can see where China is. China, the mainland consists of China proper, Tibet, Xinjiang, Inner Mongolia, and Manchuria. So it's the largest country in population in the world, and it's the third largest in area. Ancient China is bounded by the Gobi Desert, the Pacific Ocean, and the Tibetan Mountain Plateau. So the Tibetan Mountain Plateau is all this area, huge high plateau that we talked about before. And then we have the Pacific Ocean on this side, Philippine Sea over here, but this is all the Pacific Ocean. And then, of course, we have the mountain plateau, Himalaya mountains that we talked about on the east. So there are two great river systems, Wanghe and Yangtze there. And Wanghe is this yellow-brown color. It's actually where the first civilization settled, along the Wanghe. And it's also called China's sorrow because the Wanghe would flood and have really disastrous floods that would kill many people. The history of China. Well, the Wanghe civilization is the first known civilization to come into that area shortly after the Tower of Babel. So we're talking way back, 2000, before 2000 BC. And they called their land Chongkua. What's Chongkua? It meant middle country. And it was called the middle country because they believed that it was at the center of the world. So they lived in isolation from the rest of the world for many centuries, a few thousand years, in fact. Here's a picture, the ancient civilization on the Wanghe. Ancient dynasties, so there's 10 ancient dynasties that we'll go through, and you have to know these because I think it's might be one of your test questions. The first is the Qing dynasty between 1525 to 1028 BC. The Qing dynasty was the ancient. The next dynasty, they're both ancient, but this is goes way back, even probably further than that maybe. So the Qing, or the Chao now is 1122 to 256 BC. This is a long period of time. In fact, it's the longest ruling dynasty, plus it had the philosophers. We have the philosophers there during that time that are very famous, and we'll be talking about them a little later. And the Qin dynasty, 255 to 206 BC. Kind of a short dynasty there, but it's where a lot of things happened. In fact, it was the first emperor there. And then, of course, Qin, named for China then, named itself China. And the Great Wall was built then during that time. The next dynasty, the fourth dynasty, was the Han dynasty between 206 BC to 220, beginning of Roman rule, and when Jesus was born during that time, and Jesus died on the cross during that time and rose again. And this is the time of the Silk Road, because those Roman Caesars, they wanted their silk. And so they would send people on the Silk Road, whether it's dangerous or not, to get them silk from China. It was the height of glory for China. So then there's three dynasties, the Sui, the Tang, and the Sung. And this is during the Middle Ages. I'm not going to go into those too much. But we're going to go right into the Yuan dynasty. The Yuan dynasty was where the Mongolians came in, and the Khans, Kublai Khan and Genghis Khan, and we'll talk about that. And that was actually the largest empire in the world in history, was the Mongolian Empire. And then we'll go on to the Middle Ages with the Ming and the Manchu-Qing dynasty, those last two dynasties we see. And here's a picture of kind of the dynasties and the clothing. See the silk, how everyone wanted silk. See how beautifully the silk is, because they developed silk from those silkworms. So let's talk a little bit about these dynasties. The Shang dynasty was 1525 to 1028 BC, the first ancient, dynasty. Actually, the dynasty came from the Tower of Babel, they say, so that's pretty ancient. Well, this dynasty, they were casting bronze, so they could cast bronze. They were doing that in the Sumer too. And they built chariots, and they cultivated silkworms. So the beginning of putting together silk fabric, but they cultivated those silkworms. But the most important development during this time was writing. They developed a writing system. Even though their writing system was very difficult, because they didn't have an alphabet, and they had 50,000 characters. You can imagine, not like we have 26 or whatever in our alphabet. They had 50,000 characters, so it made their alphabet a little difficult, I would say. And when they wrote their alphabet, they used bones, shells, and wood. And of course, they used the pictograph. Remember, it goes from pictograph to ideograph, right? And then to phonographs, which are the sounds. So they started just like with those pictographs, kind of like the hieroglyphics, and then onto those ideographs. That's the how it goes through those different cycles of development of the alphabet. The Chao or Zhao, sometimes they print it as Zhao. So if you see Zhao, it means Chao. And that dynasty is the longest ruling dynasty, 1122 BC to 256 BC. So that is over 1,000 years. So that was a long running dynasty. Now, you come to say these dynasties are ruled by families the whole time. So dynasty means a family ruling everybody. So the Shao dynasty lasted with a lot of families in 1,000 years, you can imagine. And they used iron tools then, and they were first to do metal coins, put metal coins together. Their Chinese laws are written down during this time, and they had two great philosophers during this time. Lao Tzu, 600 BC, and he believed harmony with nature, and even today they call this Taoism. Here's a picture of Taoism. Remember, if you're the yin and the yang and everything, that's Taoism. So he believed that everybody's a little bit bad, a little bit good, which is kind of really had no salvation, or the good, not everybody being bad. You have a mixture. So, and it was kind of just basically harmonizing. Everyone is okay, like I'm okay or you're okay. Confucius was in 600 BC, and he brought in the respect for tradition, reverence, and learning, and to cherish honesty and to honor the family. So those were some good things. Let's talk a little bit more about Confucius here. So this next slide. Confucianism. So here's a picture of him. I don't know if he really looked like that because that's a long time ago, but that's the picture we have that represents Confucius. Confucianism would, like I said, respect traditions, reverence the learning, cherish honesty, those things, honor family ties, practice these virtues, all four of these virtues at all times, and doing this, they could worship your ancestors. So they would basically, a lot of times, have these little figures or little things that represented their ancestors or drawings, and they'd worship their ancestors, which God does not want us to do, of course. So, but anyway, the dominant influence in Chinese life was Confucianism until the Communist Revolution in China. When the communists came in, the Communist Revolution came in, they went to be atheists and did away from a lot of the things, including Confucianism, which went through many decades, so. No, Confucius, I don't think he was really trying to start a religion. I think he was just trying to start a code of honor. So, but they made it into a religion. Two strong dynasties that came after this, and even though this one seems like a short time, 255 BC to 206 BC, it was a big one because they had the first emperor. His name was Qing Huang Ti. Qing Huang Ti was the first emperor of China. I remember when Adele pronounced that, but Qing Huang Ti. But anyway, he abolished the ancient feudal system that they had with the families and said, basically, we're going to go by the emperor, and the emperor was kind of like a god type figure to them that they could worship. So they abolished the old family feudal systems, kings and monarchy, and developed a strong central monarchy with a king that was an emperor. The name China comes from Qin dynasty. So when you see China, it comes from this dynasty. It goes back to this dynasty. Qin, China. The building of the Great Wall of China was to keep invaders out. They had these invaders coming, especially in Mongolia. The Mongolians were trying to get in. And so they were like, there was like 1,500 miles that they went through this Great Wall of China and built it. And this emperor had them, so many people died, and he buried them right in the wall. It's kind of gross. Here's a picture of the Great Wall of China. You still can go visit it. It's spectacular. And he also had the terracotta army. So they were digging, find archaeological evidence there of ancient cultures. And they dug up this great amount of these Chinese, not only with soldiers, but with chariots and every horses and everything, that he had them build these terracotta figures that were life size, so that when he would die, when Qi Yang Ti would die, that he felt that he would have an army to be able to come alive and protect him, which we know is not true, but that's what he did. So here we can find the terracotta army of Qing Huang Ti. And the Great Wall of China meandered around for 4,000 miles. So it's 4,000 miles of wall. The Han Dynasty was in 206 BC to 220 AD. And this Han Dynasty, or Han Dynasty, you can call it, was during the time of the Roman Empire. And it marked the height of China's glory. It's when the Great Silk Road was there because, of course, the Roman emperors, they wanted to come and get silk. And so they would link with China, so they would send. So they had this Great Silk Road. So the Han Dynasty would be considered the Golden Dynasty, the time of Chinese riches. And this is when the Christian missionaries first came. And also was when Buddhism came from India, and which joined Taoism and Confucianism, and so Buddhism became popular in China. By coming on the Silk Road, it brought in a lot of change. Chinese astrologers also devised a calendar that was 365 and a fourth days, just like ours. So they had this calendar here. The silk cloth was wove, and they had glazed pottery, plates, and they also began to make paper during this time. So you see here's the calendar here that they have, the Chinese calendar. We have the Taoism with the yin and yang there. And here we have a picture. This is the picture of the Silk Road that they drew, that, back when in ancient history, but as showing the Silk Road as all these people are coming to China on the Silk Road. The Middle Ages brought civil wars and the succession of dynasties. We had the Sui, the Tang, and the Sung dynasty 5, 6, and 7. And so it was pretty confusing times. until we got to like the 1200s. And what happened to the 1200s is the Mongolians, the Mongols, these fierce nomads from the northern steppes of Asia came in. And the leader of the Mongols, the Mongolians, was Genghis Khan. And Genghis Khan came and conquered almost everyone around, every country around. The empire of Genghis Khan was the largest continental empire ever in history. So you can imagine. In China, they called it the Wang dynasty, which was the Mongol dynasty from 1279 to 1368. So that's not AD. So 1368. So here you have a picture. This is Genghis Khan, and he's fighting. Down here you have a picture, another picture of Genghis Khan, and one of the great rulers, but very very brutal and very fierce. The dynasty, the Wang dynasty, basically Europeans became aware of China at that time. Of course, we have, they called China Cathay. So they said, we go to Cathay. The reason they did this was because of Marco Polo. So Marco Polo was an Italian that traveled with his father and uncle from Venice, Italy to China. He spent 20 years in the kingdom of Kublai Khan. Kublai Khan was the grandson of Genghis Khan. And Marco Polo reported so many things. And as he got back, actually there was a war going on between cities, and he ended up being put in this jail with this guy. And this guy encouraged him to write a book. So Marco Polo wrote this book, and it became a bestseller. And it told about the Chinese wealth and luxury. And also, he told about wonders that they had language and printed books and silk clothing and porcelain and cannons and rockets. All these things, he said, made people want to go to China and find out what was going on and go there for the riches that was displayed by Marco Polo. This is a movie, actually, of Kublai Khan and Marco Polo. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I haven't either, but I thought it was pretty significant. And you see how Marco Polo for 20 years became a friend and confidant of that great leader, Kublai Khan. Then we have the Ming Dynasty between 1368 to 1644, and the Qing, but we don't call that Qing, we called it Manchurian or Manchu Dynasty, 1644 to 1912. So the Europeans at this time attempted to open China to the West. They wanted to get in there and go out to especially get silk and other things from China at that time. Ming and Manchu rulers hampered the trade. They did not want these new Europeans coming in. In 1842 to 1860, they called it the unequal treaties. Isn't that what a lot of times treaties are with some of these European countries? So they said these treaties were not really good for China, but they were mainly good for the Europeans. But they guaranteed these trading routes and privileges to the Westerners to come. So during these dynasties here, they tried to hamper this. And the European countries that were coming in, especially Great Britain, France, and others, and Italy, of course, and they carved out colonies on the Chinese coast at this time. So here's a picture here of during this time, the Ming Dynasty and the Manchurian Dynasty there. I think that's my last one. You see how Chinese history, we'll get into later Chinese history later on in your book. Okay, that's it.